All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. It is Wednesday, and that means I'm back with another episode of Human Frequency where Krystena Lucastro joins me as a co host so that we can discuss topics from a different perspective. And what perspective is that? Well, let's bring her in and let her tell you herself and introduce today's topic. Welcome, Krystena. How are you?
I am great. How about you?
Very well. Feeling good about today because I am managing the controls here fairly well.
Thanks for taking on that responsibility.
Yes. Tough challenge, but somebody has to do it. I'm rising to the challenge. That's what I'm doing. To make
So
it
let's
sound
get this party started, man.
let's get this party started while it is freezing cold outside.
I know. Fun fact: it's been colder in Florida than it has been in Alaska. Crazy.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah.
That's
Thank you,
insane.
Florida.
I'm gonna have to fly north. Has anybody ever said that? Like, I'm gonna fly north for the
Right.
winter.
Exactly.
That's crazy talk.
Opposite of snowbirds.
I
Goodness.
know, right? So what are we talking about today?
All right. Well, just again to remind our audience, I'm Krystena Lucastro, writer, wife, mother, and just an overall curious person. And this is Human Frequency, where logic and heart stop competing and start informing each other. Because people don't just hear words; they hear their through their own experiences, and sometimes, not all the time, through others. So yeah, what we experience shapes how we hear those conversations. And today's conversation was sparked by a recent report by the Heritage Foundation
Mhm.
titled Saving America by Saving the Family, which argues that restoring marriage and traditional family structures is essential to the nation's future.
Mhm.
So, yeah, when values are framed as common sense, do we always notice what's underneath them? So, DL, from your perspective, why do you think tanks like the Heritage Foundation have so much influence in shaping cultural debates?
So I think it's interesting, and I'm gonna move some screens around here so that I'm looking at you properly. I was trying to adjust some things. I think these think tanks, I think the I think they're a value add in general, but that doesn't mean I always agree with them. So like in back in during COVID times, which I like to call it, the Cato Institute, I disagreed with them on several things, and I actually made some rebuttals to some of their material that they had put out. But I think the idea of think tanks is that you get somebody in there that's well read, they're perhaps scholarly, right? They've contributed to a body of work. Their peers have reviewed it and said here, critiqued it. So it's a very formal process, right? It's not like the internet where somebody can rise up and have a bazillion followers and be retarded. Okay. And I don't know if we're supposed to use retarded on this
We are
particular.
not supposed to be using that word
Okay.
anymore, sir.
All right. So that's only Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday I can say that. But
Okay.
but basically you get these big influencers.
Yeah.
They're they haven't went through the process of having their ideas necessarily challenged.
Yeah.
Maybe they have, but I don't and I don't mean they've never had it because if you're on the internet, your ideas are going to get challenged, right? But a lot of times you can rise up and kind of get past that same hurdle that you might have had to go through, that you would have had to go through if you joined a think tank. So I think think tanks kind of collect all these people. And then think tanks, they generally have some sort of vision. They have an underlying philosophy,
Hmm.
so like the Cato Institute, one of their underlying philosophies would be like libertarianism. I'm sure there are some Marxist think tanks out there. There are some conservative ones like the Heritage Foundation.
Yes.
And I would imagine that I don't know all of them, but I imagine that there are even some progressive ones out there where you have progressive people, that are, contributing to their ideas and saying, let's hash this out. And so they discuss policy ideas, they discuss social ideas, and they contribute to, and then that filters out to us little people that we can read their articles and stuff like that and say, yeah, this is the way we should go. So I think they're a value add, and I think they're popular because it allows for ideas that we generally are drawn to be hashed out in a way that's a little bit more formal and then presented, here's a direction for the masses.
Right.
Now
And I agree to a point, and sadly, I feel like some think tanks and the internet are starting to converge, and
Mhm.
there are people to, one of the points you made earlier, who aren't so well read, but are very opinionated with really no informed basis for those opinions. It's a lot of feelings, very little facts.
Man,
So,
you just trashed like 80% of all podcasts.
yeah, yeah.
Not this one
And
though, because I'm totally well read and all my ideas are great.
mhm. Okay, we gonna see about that. But yeah, it's funny. I'm not necessarily a fan of China, but
Right.
I definitely don't disagree with the stance they've taken that if you're not like a subject matter expert in the area, then you really shouldn't have such, position and voice in certain arenas
Mhm.
because people are very highly influenced and can take some bad direction
So
and roll with it.
let me ask you then, when you say you shouldn't have a voice, what does that mean? Like somebody stops you, or does that mean like
Yeah.
the
So
the masses just aren't drawn to you because they're
let me roll
smarter?
back on that. It's
Okay.
not that you shouldn't have a voice. I think everyone, is, you know, in my opinion, I think everyone should be allowed to speak their mind.
Mhm.
And that's fine. However, the weight of everyone's voice and opinion should not be the same, in my opinion. At
Okay.
the end of the day, I can't and shouldn't have the same weight as a board certified surgeon when speaking on someone's health. I don't have that experience. I don't have that
Mhm.
training. I don't have that background. I don't have that qualia, you know?
Mhm.
So it's just too many people speak with such certainty from such a place of ignorance. And when I say ignorance, it's the purest sense of the word of just
Mhm.
not knowing. And unfortunately, people lack the discernment themselves to know when someone is speaking with certainty and confidence that they're speaking from ignorance.
Mhm.
And it gets us all into trouble when people, follow through and they're like, hey, I tried drinking that bleach and I got sick and it didn't really help me. So it's just an unfortunate trait of humans that,
Mhm. Mhm.
we take things at face value, trusting the source when
Mhm.
sometimes the source itself is simply an opinion and not a fact.
Right.
So,
By the way,
yeah,
I have never drank bleach.
please don't.
Um, and it's funny that you use that as an example because you were probably being a little hyperbolic. But when I was growing up, there was this thing, I don't know how many people actually did it, but it was like the rumor
Yeah.
that if you needed to pass a drug test, that
Oh
you could
God.
take a gallon of water, I think, and like a teaspoon of bleach,
Yeah.
and then you drink the whole thing. I don't know that anybody actually ever did it. And if you're listening to this show and you ever do that and you get sick, that is on you. I am just referencing some nonsense that I remember, hearing about when I was in my teens. And people like, oh yeah, if you it'll force your body to kind of get rid of all the THC. And I was like, seems like it'd be easier just not to smoke, but hey, what do I know? You know. So I just wanted to tell that little story. All right, so we're talking about so we're talking about the family
Yes.
and
And
then
and
the
let me
Heritage
just
Foundation.
be clear. I don't disagree with the idea of family. I
Okay.
agree that, families matter. I've worked really hard at, building a family and sustaining my family. So family stability is extremely important. Commitment
Mhm,
matters. And I agree with all of that wholeheartedly.
mhm.
However, there's the underbelly of the argument. So the question for me isn't whether family is important, it's what actually makes families healthy and sustainable.
Okay.
So,
And so you have some disagreement with the Heritage Foundation.
I do.
Okay.
I really do.
What did they
So,
say and what did you disagree with?
they said a whole lot,
Okay.
but for the most part, what they did say and what they left out is what screamed the loudest to me.
Okay.
I, agree with the point that we need to bring family structure back. I'm not a fan of the framing, especially since I'm a fan of diversity. They make it very clear that marriage is between a man and a woman. So
Mhm,
that obviously excludes a group of people
mhm,
uh, that I hold near and dear to my heart. At the end of the day, I hold people in general near and dear to my heart, no matter what the combination is as far as what you call family.
Mhm.
And ultimately, they ignore one of the, not one, but many of the issues that I see plaguing our country and honestly the world today of just ignoring mental health, ignoring emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
ignoring some of the financial burdens that happen with family because they made the point that you'll be more like financially stable if you marry, which I don't completely agree with because especially in the United States, being married does not guarantee that you will have dual income. They ignore the fact that childcare is through the roof. And I know one of the stances that the Heritage Foundation takes is they kind of want women to stay at home, and
Okay.
be housewives. So these are just just some points that kind of dug at me that they ignored, danced around, you know, did not bring up as an issue. And
Mhm.
they only wanted to, just surface level say, hey, marriage is the solution. But to me, that's kind of a cop out because I know a lot of married people who are in very toxic situations. And if you don't fix the marriages,
Mhm.
then the is marriage truly the solution? I don't think so.
Okay. Lot to unpack there. So
Yeah.
let's start with this. Let's start with the exclusion. Okay, so we said we, not we, but they said um, the that marriage is between a man and a woman. Was there prescription for legal requirements? Like, hey, legally, we're only going to recognize man and woman, or were they saying like socially speaking? Because I think one of the things that we have to consider now, there are some conservatives out there that would absolutely ban, like, say, same sex marriages or other variants.
Right.
But there are many who will say, like, look, we just believe that marriage is properly set up as a man and a woman. Generally speaking, they're gonna fall back on religious belief. um, they might tie in a little bit of, like how humans were, quote unquote, designed in a sense, right? There may be some biological arguments to be made there, but they'll leave it in the sphere of social and say, like, look, if a man and a man want to get married, or a woman and a woman want to get married, and the state wants to recognize it, that's fine, but we want to be able to say that's not a true marriage. It's not, like, you're not a real man, like, you're not really married, kind of a thing. So did they make that distinction that you know of?
Yeah, that's the thing about the Heritage Foundation, and I don't want to turn this into a big old, critique of them,
Mhm,
but from the standpoint of the fact that they mentioned man and woman,
mhm,
it very clearly to a person who is discerning and aware sets the stage of what they feel the definition of marriage is.
mhm,
Because ultimately, if they were neutral as they say they are, they would have just said marriage and
mhm,
left that to everyone else to decide what marriage looks like and what marriage is for that individual, which is ironic that they stand on a point of uh, individual responsibility.
mhm.
And to me, that's more important than them trying to be so specific as to what they believe it is. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stated that,
Okay.
and that's why again, they come off and they present themselves as a neutral, nonprofit, but underneath it all, they are pretty much inspired
Right.
by
Right.
conservative Christian values.
Right. And I guess where I'm going with this, when these think tanks, it doesn't matter whether it's a conservative one, a communist one, a progressive one, a libertarian one. It doesn't really matter to me, although I'm going to be more drawn to the libertarian ones. But the other ones, what I look at is I say, are you trying to enforce something by law? If you
Yeah.
are, that's where I will make my biggest objection. If you're not, then I'm a lot less worried about it, right? And that's and for me, because I say, like, if we're not enforcing certain things, then people are still free to do what they want to do, which means a man can marry a man, a woman can marry a woman, right? So that's why I was asking that, because for me, that's really, because I personally am more conservative
Hmm.
personally.
Yeah.
But when it comes to my politics, I'm like, most of the time, I'm like, government has no business doing this. It's not your job.
Hello.
Your job is
Exactly.
to be basically a mediator, and maybe offer, fire and rescue. That's about it. There's not
Exactly.
much
And
else
that's
for
where
you.
that individual responsibility comes in. That's the individual's call, not the policymaker's call.
Right. But
So I
let's
agree with you there.
shift over to the, so we know where we stand with the marriages, right? You prefer, a more open, diverse culture when it comes to marriages. Like, hey, if you want to marry another man, if you want to marry another woman, if you want to marry a man and a woman, or I presume if you want polyamorous, you can.
As
I'm
long
not
as
sure,
both
not sure
parties
how
are
that works.
consenting.
Right, consenting adults, right?
Yes.
And I agree with you on that. We're not gonna have any disagreement there. And I think any disagreement that we have beyond that, like, legally is probably gonna be very minor.
Mhm.
Um, but I would like to focus on what makes a good family,
Yeah.
because like you said, not every family is necessarily a good family unit. My
Right.
mother grew up in one that was not, for sure. She was
Same.
heavily abused.
My
And
mom, a lot of our family grew up in dysfunction. And
right.
so I think that's the piece that too in that article from, or not even an article, but in that piece that was dropped by the Heritage Foundation that they again just glossed over.
Mhm,
They glossed over the dysfunction that families, and even sadly on a macro level our nation is dealing with. Oftentimes, and I call it the collective narcissists, they want to ignore, they want
mhm.
to deflect, they want to blame, and they don't take any ownership or accountability as to why things aren't going well, but they still want to put up this facade that
Right,
things are great, family is everything, yet they won't go to therapy. And I'm
right.
like, if family is everything and you're willing to, you know, take on that responsibility, to me it's just as responsible to take on your own mental health so
Mhm,
that the family itself is healthy, because marriage and family to me are simply containers, they're
mhm.
not the cure,
Right.
you know
Let
so
me let me read something to you that I just thought of.
mhm.
I'm gonna I gotta find it here really quickly. I saw this the other day, and I bookmarked it for my Dad Talk series, because I
Noise.
thought it would be very useful, but I think there's a value add here if I could just find it. Give me a second. I know where I can go. Do. Let's go here, and here it is. So I think this is somewhat related.
Okay.
So this is by somebody who I generally disagree with, but I think we're in agreement here. He says, "Some wisdom for the confused single men here.
Mm,
Women want a man who can share his feelings, but they also need a man who can be stoic and in control of himself.
mm.
A man dumping his feelings too early or too often signals a weakness and self-obsession that suggests he would be a bad protector and provider. It's
Oi.
also rewarding for a woman to coax those feelings out a bit at a time. And if a man dumps his emotions on her all at once, the thrill of pursuit is gone. In that sense, male feelings are like male sexuality. Or I'm sorry, in that sense, male feelings are like female sexuality. They should be guarded, controlled, and shared only with the person who has earned the right to be there. So, men, learn the masculine art of controlling your emotions, share them sparingly when she really wants you to. Once you're married, all bets are off. The sex and emotions can be a free flowing back and forth. But until then, control yourself. Let her know you're strong and safe. Leave some mystery for her to unlock. Keep her interested. What do you think?
I agree, sadly. No, I won't say
Yeah.
sadly. Funny enough, ironically enough, I agree with that as well. Because ultimately we are in a hunt,
Mhm.
for before marriage. We've been programmed as animals to, as women to be pursued and as
Mhm.
men to do the hunting. So yeah, no, you can't lay all the cards out. You have to leave some mystery
Right.
to the pursuit. And then obviously once you decide, mutually consenting
Mhm.
to get married, all bets are off the table. Now you're a partnership, you're a
Right.
unit. And you have to, if you want to move in lockstep, you have to have open communication, and you have to have, I won't say complete, but a broad understanding of one another so that you're in alignment in this long haul journey together.
Mhm.
And when people play coy and they have all this mystery within marriage, it causes a lot of problems unnecessarily.
Right.
So with everything that person said, I actually do agree. And funny enough, I'm writing a piece on this that I
Mhm.
was inspired by with the 4B movement. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Isn't that in Asia where, like,
Yeah,
the
it's
you
in
have to
Korea.
tell the audience what 4B is, because I don't remember now?
So 4B, and I'm gonna probably jack this up, but in Korea, women are basically taking a stance against the patriarchal society.
Okay.
They are tired of not being respected. They're tired of being seen as vessels and not human beings. And so they've chosen to take a step back. The 4Bs have a word that they correlate with in the Korean language, but translating it into English, it basically means no sex, no dating, no marriage, no children. And they are refusing to partake in the greater society until some things change on the side of the men,
Mhm.
where their emotional intelligence grows. They are, more protective and a safe space for women to feel like, hey, I can actually partner with a man and not feel like I'm taking on a burden or an extra child of
Right.
someone to take care of in the sense of I'm his mother and not his partner.
Right.
So with that, unfortunately, the birth rates in Korea, and I believe this is South Korea, um, they have declined because of this movement. And I started seeing parallels in the United States. And it's gotten to the national stage where birth rates are falling. And there's now a male loneliness epidemic.
Mhm.
And what I'm not hearing in the gap, I'm hearing a lot of finger pointing of men blaming women for the birth rates going down. And then, obviously women, and I am a woman, so I'm a little biased,
Mhm, mhm.
pointing their fingers at men saying, hey, we're not saying we don't want to be with you. We're saying we can't and won't be with you until, some of this criteria is met where you're emotionally intelligent. I can
Mhm.
feel safe in my marriage. You're, not only a provider because sadly, and I feel like this is a very antiquated way of thinking that needs to grow. A lot of men feel that being a good husband is simply being a good provider, bringing home a check, and that's it.
Mhm.
And that is not at all, at least from my standpoint, what marriage is about. Yes, providing is important, but if you cannot provide a safety for your wife or your significant other, your partner, in your children, in the way of emotions and you know just beyond financial need, then are you really, in a healthy, whole relationship with your partner and your family? No, there's too many men that are detached and just aren't offering up what women need as far as uh, help.
Right.
There's just so many men out there who believe that women are born and bred to be caretakers and to provide a service to them as far as cleaning up after them, cooking, taking care of the kids. And I can tell you, as someone who was, raised to be very independent and self sufficient, that I'm a human too.
Mhm.
I don't want to have to be relegated to the kitchen, the laundry room, the house. That is not my domain. Just like men, women's domain has now become, the world.
Mhm.
And there's just not a balance, not a fairness there. And a lot of women have opted out. And I respect that. And my situation is different because I waited a little longer in my journey to find a partner, and I found somebody who was willing to be a equal partner,
Mhm.
someone who was willing to be a responsible parent with me, and not a man who views, watching the kids as helping out. And it's like you're not helping out when it's your own kids.
Right.
You're being a responsible parent with
Mhm.
your wife. So at the end of the day, it's all about mindset.
Mhm.
And sadly, I just don't see that the societal mindset has shifted for men as it has for women, because obviously, since women have gained their independence and joined the working world and gained financial stability, they realize a lot of the freedoms that men have,
Mhm.
and they want the same. And they're looking for a partner who respects that and is willing to balance it out and take on half of the burden of being a parent,
Mhm.
take on the burden of, working through a marriage together and not just being a silent partner who's being blindly led, because they too, and when I say they, I mean women,
Mhm.
have a voice, have wants, dreams, needs, and desires just like men do. and they want to have an equal seat at the table, aka a unit and partnership. And so, again, all that to say, I completely understand why, for all intents and purposes, the 4B movement has pretty much moved to the United States. And now we're starting to feel the brunt of that when women have done a lot of growth emotionally. And sadly, for a lot of men, they've not grown in that same way, nor have they adjusted with the change in times.
Hmm.
That women aren't interested in going back into the kitchen, they aren't interested in being silenced, they aren't interested in taking on a role that basically causes them to shrink themselves.
Mm.
So, because there's this lack of equilibrium, there's a void that's happening. And I think that's why the Heritage Foundation came out with saying,
Mhm.
hey, you know what'll fix this problem if men and women come back together and get married. But
Right.
you can't force people and pressure people into a situation that they know is going to be unhealthy and not beneficial for them. And I know I'm yappering on because it just hits a lot of points.
Hmm.
But what women have learned too is that marriage actually lessens their life expectancy, whereas for men, it actually increases their life expectancy. So
Oh, well, then it's
women,
the end, and we're done then. No more conversation
right?
to have, right?
And
I'm
my
living
whole
a
thing
long
is
time.
we don't have to be done. We just have to do some tweaking and
Right.
some real hard work. And in a previous segment of ours of, people who have chosen to go no contact with families, that's really at the crux of this too. Like too many individuals, as far as adult children and their parents, this isn't, you know, unique to that uh relational, setup. This
Hmm.
it happens across the board. If you get into a toxic relationship, why would you stay?
Hmm.
If all you're asking for is to be seen, heard, and supported, I don't think that's too big of an ask if you're looking to have a long, stable
Hmm.
relationship, aka family, in the long run. And it seems like we've got one side that's willing to do that work and another side that isn't. And
Gotcha.
until we address those factors of what makes a healthy, sustainable relationship, marriage again is just not the fix.
Gotcha. So it sounds like um, the battle of the sexes rages on effectively.
Whew.
It just looks a little different today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, some interesting points here. So going back to the what I read to you a moment ago,
Yeah.
what I thought was very interesting was that there was this comparison to male emotion, female sexuality, and basically
Yes.
saying, "Hey, don't give it up all at once,
Yeah.
because giving it up all at once has negative consequences." Right, and I think it's pretty obvious, if like I understand that there's this desire by many to say, "Oh, women should, have a lot, choice with their sexuality, and they can do whatever they want." And I don't necessarily disagree. I just think that it's probably like from what I've observed it seems to hit women differently
Oh yeah.
when they have more partners,
Yeah.
right, than men. That's not to say that it's a good thing for men to
I
have
know I
a
was
lot of
gonna say
partners.
it's an
I'm just saying
unfair
it hits
double
differently.
standard. It's an unfair double standard in my opinion because men are often encouraged to go soak your wild oats and go out there, be free, go through as many women as you like.
Right.
Um, and I'm not saying that's, across the board what happens. There are parents
Mhm.
that teach their young men to go out there, respect women, and to also
Right.
hold themselves back from those type of pressures.
Right.
Uh, and temptations. But ultimately, women don't get that same grace and they're seen as less than,
Mhm.
which I think is disgusting. I came across, a silly social media post the other day talking about, I think it was Cardi B and Meg the Stallion. And the points that they were making were that Cardi B was a mom of three, that she, gone from guy to guy. And then, on Megan Stallion's side too, Meg the Stallion, that she too, had gone through many guys, but now they're both in what is perceived are great relationships, but many
Mhm.
people feel like they're deserving
Right.
because of their history. And that to me is just so short sighted, so hypocritical, and just not very, supportive of just the human experience.
Right.
People learn and grow, and yeah, children can appear to be baggage to some, but at the end of the day, if you mature as a human being, if you are a good human being, you are deserving
Mhm.
of a healthy relationship. And just because you were one way at one point in your life and you've changed and you're no longer like that, does that then mean that you should be excluded from those same opportunities and and that same beautiful full life just
Right.
because you lived a different life prior to? I don't
Yeah.
agree with
Yeah, and I see it on, I I don't know that I don't think I recognize all the names that you just dropped. I know the Cardi B, some of the older ones, but some of the newer ones I'm not gonna be as familiar with. But
it.
I do see similar sentiment on, like, X, where I spend more of my time, and there'll be OnlyFans stars who then come out and they're like, "Oh, I'm quitting OnlyFans and I'm getting a family and now I'm having kids." And then people do seem bitter about it. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't know why you're bitter about someone that you'd never met, or maybe you were a fan. I don't know, but I'm not bitter about it. In fact, I think if you oppose that lifestyle and somebody gives it up, well, are
wouldn't
you
you
expect
celebrate that?
are you expecting that they give it up and then just live in poverty and destitute, emotional destitute, and be like, "Oh, I was a hoe and now I can't have a real life." What are you asking for people, right? Like, that seems absurd to me. So
Right,
I'm like, "Hey, I think you should I think women should quit porn. I think they
right.
should settle down and have a family. I don't think men should be out there sleeping around either." Right? So I look at it and I
Mhm.
say, this is my standard for both of them. Do people do that? Yes. Do people sow their if your oats are like one or two people, and I don't mean like you're just going out and sleeping around, but like if your oats are like, you know, I found somebody I really like and we're having an intimate relationship, okay, fine, whatever, right? Like, but if you're like, I'm just running through as many as I can, I think that's just bad no matter who you are.
Yeah.
But like, I think because, a lot of women will be like, "Oh, there's a double standard." And there is. There is a double standard. Like, "Oh, if a man sleeps with 12 women, nobody blinks an eye, but if a
He's
woman
just a
sleeps with a."
player. He's just a
Right.
player.
But on the flip side, if a woman cries a lot, nobody's like, "Oh, man, what's wrong with her?" But if a man cries a lot, they're gonna or
Oh,
once,
there's
right?
definitely double standards on the other side.
Yeah, and so now I wonder, what if our double standards, what if they actually are built on a certain level of reality, but we've overdone them?
Oh, I
You know what I
100%
mean?
agree with I 100% agree with that.
'Cause
And
that's
I
why I like
too
this
y
commentary where he's
y
like, "Look, women, your sexuality, guard that. Men, guard
right,
your emotions." And I'm like, maybe that's
yeah,
how we build healthy relationships is we recognize that in general, yes, women are gonna
mhm,
b so sexuality is different for women
yeah,
than it is men,
yeah,
right? Not better or worse, just different. And
yeah.
then emotions are different for men and women, and we need to, in general,
And the sad part to
recognize that.
me is they shouldn't be different because
Really?
ultimately, I don't think so. I
Okay.
think that we, unfortunately, just through historical conditioning, have just been programmed to believe that men should and have to be one way and women should and have to be another. And for me, again, with my work with Qualia, the lived experience, we're all just human beings trying to survive,
Mhm.
and that should be what really matters. So I think we've, as far as genders have done, both sides have done each other a disservice in not really what I would consider cross training each other.
Mhm.
you know it's important for women to express their emotions just
Mhm.
as much as it's important for men to express their emotions. Funny enough, I'm also writing a piece about, I actually sympathize and empathize with a lot of men who they've been taught, real boys don't cry, suck it up, grow a pair, like all of this,
Mhm.
toxic masculinity, they call it, to the point now when they do get into a marriage, they are ill prepared to be partners,
Mhm.
ill prepared to be parents, because something as simple as a little boy wanting to do some role play, aka just playing,
Mhm.
because ultimately, for kids, I see playtime as practice for life. You see, parents buying little kitchen sets for their daughters, dress up clothes for their daughters, baby dolls for their daughters. They are setting them up to be the ideal, mom, parent, partner, all these things, but they don't do the same thing for little boys. So, but then the expectation when you become a father and a husband is that all the things that, the girls have been practicing all their life through play, little boys haven't, and they're ill equipped. They don't know how to hold a kid. Many of them detest and refuse to change diapers, leaving all that responsibility on the mom. And that's
Mhm.
not fair. And I think let your sons play dress up,
Mhm.
let your sons play kitchen, let them play husband, let them, explore their own identity and practice, being a human being, because men, a lot of them, because of this loneliness epidemic, have to live alone. So a lot of them don't know how to clean up after themselves.
Mhm.
A lot of them are just, they're looking for a woman to be their mother and to take care of them, because they never got the opportunity to practice being a person who is self-sufficient and independent. These to me are life skills. They're not women's skills.
Mhm.
They're not men's skills. And so
Gotcha.
that's what I mean by, I feel like society as a whole, because of how rigid these containers have become as far as gender roles, have set each side up for failure. One to be the carrier of certain burdens, and one to be able to put their hands up, but then also just not be able to survive on their own,
Mhm.
because they've been taught, oh, that's something women do. I don't need to know how to do that. And then they come to find out, or as we like to say nowadays, they FOFA, F around and find out that, oh, dang, I probably should have learned how to do my own laundry. I
Mhm.
probably should have learned how to cook some simple dishes instead of just eating fast food every day because I'm afraid to go into the kitchen.
Right.
So, yeah, just that's the larger conversation that I'm always, trying to peel back the layers of, well, why do we keep talking about men versus women? And I'm guilty of it too,
Mhm.
because we got to start somewhere. But ultimately, this is a human problem that we need to address on both sides, so that we can actually talk to each other, understand, and support each other better. Because if
Right.
you're dealing with people who are emotionally unavailable versus somebody who is all about the feelings, there's definitely going to be a disconnect, a wedge, and something that's going to drive them apart. And that's why divorce is very real right now. There's also this thing, I think it's called gray or silver divorce, where women who are in their 50s and over are fed up. They're tired of being silenced, unheard, and, left to basically be the maids in their home, and
Mhm.
while their husbands get to sit back and enjoy this service, this free
Right.
service. So it's just a bunch of imbalance, and we need to bring balance back to relationship by teaching both sides to be cross trained in the other.
Right. I think one of the resistant factors for many people is sometimes I agree that there should be, how do I wanna put it? I agree there should be more equality, but not equality in the sense that many of the progressive left present it as,
Okay,
right? Because a lot of times
tell me more.
I feel like it's presented as, okay, men and women are 100% equal.
No,
There is no differences, and I'm like, that's how it's presented sometimes, not necessarily
no,
you.
I get it, but I'm just
And
disagreeing
and
with the
so
point.
and so
Yeah.
I think it comes across that way as like, um, and I think that there are inherent differences,
Oh
not
yeah.
necessarily bad,
Yeah.
just different. I think that, we
Nuance.
right,
Correct.
and, like, I think women in general are going to be more drawn to displays of emotion, particularly like tears and sadness and stuff like that. Whereas you're going to see men more likely to be drawn toward displays of emotion like anger, and then maybe both of them will be about equal unhappiness and stuff like that.
But is that due to their nature or nurture?
I think it's nature, and we've probably nurtured some of it as well.
Hmm.
There have been studies that have kind of come out and said, "Look, we've given like a lot of parents have like tried to play the, we're going to give our child, our boy, equal toys, girl toys, boy toys, and the boy seems to always be drawn to the boy toys. He always like, it's like the running joke that you can give a boy a chicken finger and he will chew it into the shape of a gun and be like bam bam. Like, and I've seen that with my own son, like,
But
things that
what's funny
we have not
in saying
introduced him
that
to.
is those kids typically aren't in isolation. The thing about human nature too is that we're always looking for belonging. We're always
Right.
looking to fit in. And so we can't factor out the variables that influence our children. You know, Funny enough, in this day and age with streaming, there aren't a lot of commercials that come through my house.
Mhm.
But when I was a kid, it was, Barbie and all of the toys,
Right.
and they were very gender specific.
Right.
And, kids see those commercials. The way they're actually marketed makes them want this lifestyle or this reality. then they go to school and they talk about it with their peers, and they all feel the same way, so they're gravitating towards that because that's what they're marketing to girls, and vice
Right.
versa with the boys. And so I don't inherently believe that boys are just drawn to it and girls are just drawn to it. There's a reason why they're drawn to it. Because back in the day, blue used to be a girl color and pink used to be a boy color. And all of a sudden
Right.
it
But
switched.
but think about what you just said.
Yeah.
You just said, like we said, hey, they used to be flip flopped, right?
Right.
But they were distinct, boy color, girl color. And if
No,
you
but
look
my,
back
my
through human
point is that's
history,
how it's
we've always had that
marketed.
distinction.
Correct. We've had that distinction because we've created that distinction
But I'm
for
saying
them.
every society has
Yeah.
had male stuff, female stuff,
No, no, no. I
separate
don't disagree with
every
that.
one of them that's ever existed.
But that is a
Are they all
creation.
just nurturing, or at some point do we say maybe it's natural to some
I
degree?
think it's nurtured because if they can be swapped, then who's to say they can't be swapped back? Where, if we start marketing, army toys and
Mhm,
karate and all that stuff to girls and vice versa to boys of kitchens
mhm,
and dresses and all this stuff that they wouldn't then, be influenced to think that that's normal and that's okay and that's what they're
mhm.
supposed to accept. And I know that's a whole larger conversation
Sure,
about
sure, sure.
an agenda or what have you that people think is happening and I don't agree with, but ultimately we are influenced by what we digest, and what's presented to us as acceptable, and that's all I'm getting at.
Mhm.
So and I don't think that's right, and I think people,
Right,
unless you're raising children in isolation, no television, no friends, yeah, if you flip flop and give them a girl aka boy toys, and a boy girl toys, and then they go out into the world after their formative years, they may have a rude awakening of saying, oh, I didn't know that this wasn't okay, I
right,
didn't know that this wasn't normal. And who's the one to say what is normal, what's normalized, what is okay?
right. So I guess what I'm getting at is I think that there is a basis in nature. Okay.
Yes.
Um, and we may be exploiting that because I think that's what humans do. And
Yes.
I agree with you on some points. So I thought of a quote that I think you'll like. This is from Robert Heinlein.
Okay.
He says, "A human being is one of my favorite, actually. A human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects." It's one of my favorite quotes because I'm somebody that, like, dabbles in everything.
Yeah.
I try to do some woodworking, I like writing sometimes, I like podcasting, I like public speaking, I like
Jack of
reading
all
about law.
trades,
Yeah, I'm
right?
I'm I'm a
Yes.
jack of all trades, and that's what I'm raising my son to not necessarily be per
Yeah.
se, but I'm raising him with the idea that anything he wants to do is just a matter of how much effort he's willing to put into it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, obviously, there are gonna be some things that are just simply off limits naturally. Like, he doesn't seem to be very big, so I don't think he's gonna be in the NFL, okay? Unless something changes. He's probably just gonna be flat out too small. End of story.
No.
I've seen some of these football playing boys, like, they
Hey, he
big.
could be the Spud Webb of football. You
Right,
never
right.
know.
I mean, perhaps. I would never say it's totally off limits, but I
Yeah.
would say there are some things where it's just isn't for you because that wasn't the card that wasn't in the
Right.
deck of cards that you were dealt,
Yeah.
right? And my mom did what I think you would have appreciated. I asked her one day when I was a kid, I was like 12, and I was like, "How come I gotta do dishes and the laundry?" And she said, "I'm not raising you to be dependent on a woman."
Ooh,
That was
see?
her
Thank you,
answer.
mama.
And my
Thank
mom
you.
was not a feminist
Appreciate
of
you.
any kind.
Yeah.
She was not a feminist. She just believed, "Hey, you should be, generally speaking, self-sufficient. This isn't a
Yeah.
male versus female thing.
I think
This is
she was
just a."
speaking from experience.
Right. Like, what if you're single? Who gonna do the
That part.
laundry? Who gonna clean your house? Somebody got to,
And that's
right? If
my
you can.
point. Just
Yeah.
human skills.
Right.
Human
And
skills.
and we're doing that with our son.
Yeah.
We're raising him to have the skills. And from our perspective, we're not doing it as a we're fighting the patriarchy or feminism, or we're just like, this is a skill you need to have, kid.
Right.
You
And
should be able to unload the dishes and
yeah.
put clean, and cook a meal from time to time because who knows what life is going to throw at you.
Exactly. And, kind of somewhat shifting, uh, what I think a lot of what makes these conversations, not necessarily between you and I, but just in general, so heavy is that, our people in general, all of us, have a bad habit of generalizing.
Hmm.
And so we try to, put everybody in one big box of, to make it easier to move and progress forward, you know?
Right.
But ultimately, we do have to take a step back. And this is also kind of my argument with this proposal by the Heritage Foundation as far as saving families, is that you have to, you know, look at people at the or the not the macro all the time. You got to go to the micro level
Hmm.
and look at them as individuals because yes, most women may have a certain, you know, aptitude for things and,
Hmm.
attraction to certain things. It's just the same as men. But then when you look at it at the individualistic layer, I know some little boys who, they move in their emotion.
Right.
That's what they lead with, and they're criers, and they are soft. They have what you would call feminine energy.
Hmm.
And then, funny enough, myself, I grew up, with masculine energy
Right.
and not wanting to do all the quote unquote girly things because I thought it was lame. I would be
Right.
considered a tomboy.
Right.
And so then when you take those individuals and you try to stick them into the crowd and say, nope, you go to that side, you go to that side, that just makes people feel really uncomfortable. And
Right.
it makes them feel unseen, unheard. And then that's when we get into these problems like this proposal of, hey, because you're in this box, you must follow this, this rule.
Hmm.
And I just feel like with every family, with every marriage, with every partnership, you should allow your partner to be who they are
Hmm.
and recognize each other's strengths and weaknesses and see if they are if those strengths and weaknesses together are compatible.
Right.
um with that, again, in my marriage, me having, a more masculine energy, and my husband who was raised with a bunch of sisters, he's got, actually more experience with women than I probably do as far as like under in the household and growing up and all that stuff.
Right.
And so we balance each other out in that way. And
And I think that's the point, right? To
yeah,
balance
it's
each other out.
that's it.
Um,
So I feel like that balance is so important. Finding a partner who, again, has strengths and weaknesses that
mhm.
complement who you are and complement the family and future that you're looking to build. Again, because to me, family is important. I mean, how else are, well, I, there are other ways to make procreate in this
Right.
day and age. You don't
Sure, sure.
necessarily need family, but as far as creating that safe foundation, safety net, structure, village, family is important.
Right. No, I agree. And I think we're probably in agreement that man, tell me if I'm wrong, family is the best foundation to a society, right? And we're just saying family. We're not defining it necessarily just yet. We're just
Yeah,
saying
right.
family is the foundation to a society. Because at the end of the day, I look at it and I say, like I spent uh, well, I guess maybe not 18 years. My sister is 12 years younger than me. So 12 years. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. She's 6 years younger than me. My brother is 12 years younger than me. So
Still
let's
early.
see. We grew up, and then she would have been 6 years behind me. So she would have been 12. So yeah, we spent 12 years growing up together. And my brother and I spent 6 years growing up together,
Mm,
right? Before I moved out and, was an adult and whatever. And so that's a long time, and that's your most formative years. And so I think those kind of help drive who you end up becoming, right?
agreed.
And so I think family is absolutely foundational. It's very interesting. There were stories that I remember reading about after slavery when there were men that would go and they would literally walk across like whole states to try to go and find their family.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that tells you something about the importance of family.
Yeah,
By the way, I'm not so confident that men today would walk
do
across a
the
whole state
same.
to go get their
Right.
family. But hey, if you would walk 500 miles, to go find your wife and play the song in your head over and over and over, then awesome. Good for you.
I was just playing that song in my
Right,
head.
right.
Thank you.
So, like, in some of our and what I'm trying to get at here, some of our notes here, like, we talk about, like, we've got notes that we haven't even touched upon, like, women's invisible labor, emotional development of men. I think a lot of these can be resolved by this. So here's my proposal.
Okay.
Number 1, we say family, absolutely important. That doesn't mean that it's so important that you ignore your own cost. So if you're in a toxic relationship, and there are men that are abusive, there are women that are abusive on
Yes.
whatever level. I am not saying you have to tolerate that kind of behavior. I'm just saying that the idea is that family is absolutely paramount to a society. Okay. But then we got to figure out, okay, what is that family? How do they behave more so than how do they look? Because you're gonna have different kinds of families. Like your family is an all black family. My family is intermixed, right? Because
Mhm.
I'm Native American, my wife's Asian, right? So we're totally different in that regard. I think we can then say there are general foundations for which women and men naturally exist on, but they are not necessarily fixed. My wife's an engineer. Okay. She broke the mold before I even met her. She broke
Right.
the stereotype because she loves math, right? Like not very not many women are like, I love math and I want to be an engineer.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing. Right. When we got together, we didn't say, all right, you're the woman, I'm the man. These are your responsibilities. But we did start with those foundations. I take out the trash. I cut the grass,
Yeah.
right? Um, she will uh she will do more of the laundry than I will, right? Those are some of the things that we've worked out in terms of what work for us. All right.
Correct.
But then we deviate. So I do
Correct.
most of the cooking, you
Okay.
know. I have fired her from cleaning because I don't like how she cleans. Okay. You know,
Ah,
and I think this is how we get past these toxic type relationships by saying, "Okay, it's okay to start with the foundation and say there are some masculine roles, there are some feminine roles, but
yes.
don't be so fixed to them because they
And
may not work for the person that
and Dia,
you're gonna."
we 100% agree on
Alright,
that.
alright,
For
awesome.
dang it, we gotta disagree on some stuff.
No,
I'm
well, we
trying to
started
fight
out
you, man.
disagreeing, right? We had some disagreements initially
Right.
a little bit, and,
Okay, okay.
uh, and
But
and and
no, I
we
completely
worked
agree. And
ourselves to a
honestly,
solution.
yeah, like my husband and I have a similar setup. He is a self-taught chef, and I am a self-taught taste tester. So but funny enough, before we got married, we decided to sign some social contracts with each other. One for friendship, which
Like,
I think
physically signed?
physically signed.
Really?
Yes, they're
Oh,
on the wall in our bedroom
okay, cool.
as a daily reminder to one another of what we signed up for,
Okay,
literally and figuratively.
alright.
So one is a marriage contract, and one is a friendship contract of what we both agree to bring to the table, and both of them are gender neutral. Because to your point, we both agree because we're a part of the society that there are expectations
Mhm.
of either gender. But what we did, much like you and your wife, I'm sure, is we brought all of our cards to the table of our strengths and weaknesses. My husband's a great chef. I'm actually very fond of cleaning. And I have no problem after he whips up a great meal of coming up, after him and cleaning up the kitchen. And there's the taking out the trash, those responsibilities. But greater than that, a step beyond that, when it comes to marriage, it's just that understanding of life happens. And
Mhm.
when life happens, there's going to be times when one person is going to have to hold 80, 90, 95% of the responsibility, and the other one is only capable of doing but so much. And that often shifts. There's an
Mhm.
ebb and flow to life.
Right,
No, no life as far as the long haul relationship is always going to be 50-50 because people aren't always 100%.
right.
You're going to be down because you're sick, in
Mhm.
sickness and in health. And when that happens, is the person who's the primary with paying bills able to just easily say, hey, you got it because I don't? Or
Right.
is it going to break the family because that person stayed in their box, stayed in their lane? And so that's why my husband and I, we take very seriously the cross training.
Mhm.
There are things that we are primary on just for the sake of efficiency,
Mhm.
because we recognize that that's a strength of the other. But it doesn't mean that if one of us drops the ball, that everything falls apart.
Right.
And to your point, I think that's so essential and necessary of people to have those conversations before they sign on the dotted line of this is the partnership that I'm going to ride for and die for moving forward, without having those understandings of each other, of what you agree to, what you're
Right.
signing up for. Too many people sign up for things like a darn credit card holder in college where you're like, oh, I get all these great benefits. And then when stuff goes sideways, they're bankrupt, they're broken, all these things because they didn't read the fine print. And understanding that fine print up front saves so many people. Understanding who's, emotionally stronger than the other,
Mhm.
be willing to have the hard conversations when stuff, goes sideways, when there's misunderstandings, instead of, stonewalling each other, or just not being willing and open to listen to the other partner and causing things to fall apart. And I think
Right.
that emotional maturity in relationship, in addition to all those other very tangible things, are just as important, because without it, everything falls apart.
Right. No, I think we've come to an agreement here.
Right.
And the value add in this is not fighting feminism, it's not fighting the patriarch, it's
No.
building families,
Building
you
families and
know?
fighting for each other.
Right, because, let's put it this way. I just saw a story this morning
Mhm.
out of Australia. A 13-year-old boy and, like, some siblings, I don't know how many, and his mother were out kayaking and paddleboarding, and they ended up getting swept out to sea.
Mm.
And at some point, they made a decision for the 13-year-old boy to swim back and go get help. And so
Oy.
he just swam and swam, and it was like a couple miles, several miles. And I have trouble swimming across the pool. I mean, maybe not that bad, but, I was like, "Man, that'd be rough." So this 13-year-old boy swims and swims and swims, gets back, calls for help. They've sent out some helicopters. He basically saved his family, right? And to me, I think a good, healthy family
Mhm.
would be one where anybody in that family that's capable of doing something like that would easily say, absolutely, I would 100% take that risk to save my family. They are 100% worth it, right? And if you can't say that about your family, if that's not where you are, then I think you have some work to do,
Right. Those
you know?
sacrifices, those compromises that you make
Right.
for family. And with that, there's other conditions that I agree are essential to, a healthy family structure. As I keep mentioning, emotional intelligence as an infrastructure, because if you don't feel safe, seen, supported,
Mhm.
then that's not really, a safe place to be. There's the psychological safety, the caregiving recognized as labor, because you kind of touched on that as something that we didn't really go into, but there's this mental load and invisible labor that a lot of women, especially those who are stay at home moms, and sadly, a lot of working women also have this gender role expectation that you take care of all the kids' things, the doctor's appointments, the birthday gifts, the birthday parties, the schedules. They're expected to do that for themselves, their children, and their husbands. And I constantly see this running joke online of women trying to get the family out of the house, and men, it takes them 5 minutes to just put on their shoes, their jacket, grab their keys, their wallet, jump in the car. Meanwhile, the mom is trying to negotiate with a miniature terrorist to get some shoes on, to get a jacket on, while getting themselves ready, making sure they don't forget their things, making sure they don't forget the snack bag, the waters, the entertainment, all the things to keep the children occupied before they even leave the door. And then the husband saying, "What are you taking so long for?" And that
Right.
unfair imbalance is what a lot of women are dreading and don't want to deal with. They're like, no, when we leave the house, we get, ready
Mhm.
together. There's this me versus we mentality. So there's that. The recognizing of those invisible labors, communication and repair, which I've already kind of touched on too, of just having that emotional safety and stability and the openness and willingness to, take accountability,
Mhm.
and actually validate your partner and hear, some of their issues. Because again, a gender thing has been kind of poisoning us. Of men don't need to listen to women's emotional problems, but then they decide, as far as women, to just either keep it to themselves because they know there's no point in going to talk to their husbands about it, or they'll continuously bring it up and men will call it nagging. And
Mhm.
instead of seeing it as an opportunity to hear your partner, validate your partner, and make some adjustments and change, aka grow, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And unfortunately, a lot of people take hearing these grievances or concerns from their partner as nagging instead of as an opportunity to adjust
Mhm.
and, compromise and, like I said, grow. They are like,
Right.
"Oh, you can't change me. You were supposed to marry me and accept me as I am." And the reality about marriage is, you know, we all change and grow
Mhm.
throughout our
Mhm.
entire lives, whether you're married or single.
Right.
And to act as if the person you married 7, 15, 30 years ago is the very same person that you're married to today is just false.
Right.
And then, work designed around human life. There are other countries where they prioritize life over work. And so when you've got a partner whose priority, focus, and passion is in their profession, whereas the other one basically is holding the household together, holding the house down,
Mhm.
there's that disconnect too. And there needs to be a balance there of, and that's another larger conversation of businesses, corporations, because yeah, corporate is a hot mess. They don't, in my opinion, because I came from the corporate world as well, they do not value family. They try to push the narrative that work is family. Your coworkers are your family,
Right.
and that's just not true. I don't want to see these people outside of work. I
Mm.
don't want to be penalized for not going to the company potluck when I could be going to my kids game,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
to be looked down upon because I'm not putting in the extra time and hours beyond what we've agreed to in my contract and my salary.
Mhm.
Or if I'm hourly, I clock out at 5:30 and you don't get any more because you're not giving me overtime. You
Right.
know, we just need to shift so many mentalities and mindsets around what is truly healthy family to actually be family oriented. And today, without orienting people to family, but
Mhm.
asking people to be forced into family is just, in my opinion, irresponsible because you can't fix family without fixing the people first.
Right. All right. We're getting to our end here.
Yes, sir.
So, I'm gonna do 2 things. Number 1, I'm gonna throw a comment up on the screen.
Hmm.
Feel free to add any commentary, and then give us the closing thoughts
Will
for
do.
today. So here's the commentary, or the comment, I mean. Lots of unfairness. Who pays for the date and so on? What about complementary partners that bring parts to the life that to make it good for all? I would not marry another me for a good reason. I probably wouldn't marry another me either because I would get on my nerves. Thoughts?
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't marry another me either. I need somebody to complement me, help to, iron sharpens iron. You got to push each other to be better for yourself and together. So, with that, I do want to, give a closing audience takeaway that family isn't a duty, it's a gift that requires safety to grow. It's a privilege, or family isn't a privilege, rather, it's a gift. Excuse me. And if we want stronger families, we need to stop selling nostalgia, the olden days,
Mhm.
and start building conditions for real human thriving that are up to date, current for all. So I'll leave you all with that to chew on.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I'll put you backstage, close the show out here, and then we'll chit chat. So thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, folks. That was it. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Do me a favor, folks. I want you to stop back by later, drop a comment in with your thoughts. Did we miss anything? Do we need to offer a correction? Maybe you just want to be promiscuous with praise. Whatever the case, drop a comment. Let us know your thoughts. But with that, we're out for today.